Good morning from San Diego. This is Dr. Rutledge, and I'm doing a Zoom video this morning in response to my kind of half-baked Facebook Live yesterday. So a very famous surgeon in the United Kingdom asked for a copy of that video, and it turns out that Facebook doesn't like to give up its videos easily, so it's made it difficult. And I thought I could do better than that one with me walking around with my hair not combed and in my jogging outfit. So I guess I should be quiet and go ahead then. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my diet that I prefer for my patients post-op and give you a little bit of background on that and a little bit of background on the MGB and some problems we see with surgeons reporting MGBs done their own way. And then talk about my diet just for a second. It's not my diet, it's just, I think, kind of common sense and supported by a lot. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. Okay, so I'll constantly move myself along here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the good and the bad of the MGB. In other words, if you get an MGB, does that mean your problems are solved and everything will be good and you'll be rich and famous and happy and beautiful forever? Or can there be problems that we need to pay attention to so that we get a good MGB result and not a problematic one? And I use an example, which I talked about the other day. I said someone goes to the car dealer, they buy an expensive Mercedes in this example, they get it home and it keeps crashing. So the irate customer goes back to the dealer and says, you know, this very expensive car keeps crashing. And of course, the salesperson is very upset and apologetic and say, well, let's take it for a drive. And as soon as they pull out of the dealership, the owner is noted to be driving it backwards. And so what we want to point out, a lot of the problems in my experience with MGB patients, MGB surgeons, is related to driving the car backwards. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about driving the MGB backwards by the surgeons and by the patients, and then give you some tips and pointers of how to turn the car around so that you can get the results that I see in my 6,000 patients who are now up to 23, going on 24 years after the first MGB. And so the title is Good MGB, Bad MGB, the MGB original technique, because I call it that because a lot of people claim to be doing MGBs and they're kind of making up their own approach. They make different changes we'll talk about. And that's, of course, I'm fine with people doing different operations. I wish they wouldn't call it MGB because I think it can be misleading. If they modified it, called it MGB, and they were doing better than me, then I would be happy to take credit. But a lot of people are modifying it and having terrible outcomes. And they say, oh, look, your MGB is bad. And I'm going, yeah, or you could be driving the car backwards. So the quote here is understanding. With understanding comes power and safety. And again, I always put this, don't hesitate to email me or call me anytime. Whether you're a surgeon or a patient, I'm happy to help you. And particularly if you're a surgeon, I don't want you to have trouble with the MGB because it makes me look bad. And if you're a patient who's having trouble, I'd like to help you. But also, if you're having trouble with the MGB, it makes me look bad. So it's selfish. Call me anytime. Okay. Now, I'm going to express strong opinions here, but doesn't mean I'm your doctor. So this might not be clear to the average person, but it should be really simple to understand. And that is, because you've listened to me talk to you on a video on the internet, it doesn't make me your doctor. And so I'm going to say several times in here, if you follow my advice, you'll be better, but it doesn't make me your doctor. So I'm going to say that my opinion for surgeons and for patients, come with me if you want to live, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. So I have opinions, but it doesn't make me your doctor. So here's my disclaimer. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. Hello, it's a video on YouTube. It doesn't diagnose or treat you. It does not constitute medical or professional advice. It's for entertainment purposes only. So relax, and you have a doctor, or you should have a doctor. I guess it's possible you could make me your doctor, but it wouldn't be through this. Anyway, so, okay, lighten up. Okay, I'm going to talk about these MGB paradoxes. And so I think you could visualize simply as the MGB is the savior, like Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars trilogy, or you could say the MGB is Darth Vader, this invasion of the kind of fascists taking over for the Rebel Alliance. And the example of some differences of these things is, one, we hear a lot of surgeons, myself included, saying, I see almost no reflux. And then we have a recent publication from Australia where they had 1 out of 10 patients who had MGB in Australia had to have another operation within a few years. I mean, what's the deal? So either I'm wrong, and or they're doing something wrong, or they're reporting their data wrong. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing, there's a big argument about shorter bypasses and longer bypasses. And so what's the truth? And we'll try and get to that a little bit in this talk. Okay, so a reminder then, bariatric surgery can change your life for the better, but let's be careful out there. That's what we're talking about today. It's a big decision, and the surgeon and what they do, it's a big decision. So you might want to learn the MGB using the classical approach if you want to call your operation the MGB. And if you're going to make something else up, more power to you. You can have your own GB, whatever you want to call it, but please don't call it the MGB. You son of a gun, you. So many recent publications have demonstrated that they're not doing an MGB, and they've had severe problems, complications, and even death. So that's what we're worried about today. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is part of a longer presentation, but I call this ersatz MGB surgery. Again, it's not bad, but some people like to make a shorter pouch, like a Roux-en-Y. That's not bad, but it's not an MGB. Some people end up with a twisted pouch. They don't even realize it. They can get a bird's beak pouch, a narrow pouch, a stricture at the pouch. A lot of surgeons think they're clever to dissect the EG junction. Fine, but don't call it an MGB, because we don't dissect the EG junction. Some people make the biliopancreatic limb too short or too long, in my opinion. Again, not an MGB. Stricture at the gastrojejunostomy, a kinked or tight gastrojejunostomy. We've seen people put the BP limb in backwards. And we've seen a lot of people create a bloodless connection between the gut and the small bowel and more. And I'm not going to go through these too much today, except for saying this isn't an MGB. If you get this from another doctor and they believe it's better, great, but it might not really be an MGB. Okay, and this is my old data, and we've confirmed this around the world, but I had 6,000 patients before I started traveling around the world. We have now more than 20 years follow-up, and I'm going to talk about the fact you can go on Facebook and talk to hundreds of my patients who are 10, 15, and 20 years out, and we'll show you some commentary on that. But, you know, in other words, you have the opportunity of something that's never been available in the history of the world. You can go talk to hundreds of people that have had me as their doctor. In fact, you can talk to thousands of people. Again, low complication rates, short operating time, 1-day hospital stay, now up to 24 years follow-up, and you can talk directly to those patients on Facebook. We've got controlled prospective trials showing good results, and we have a couple of prospective trials where I think the surgeons were not really doing an MGB, or they were, I won't say incompetent, but they had very bad outcomes. Plus, the MGB is unique in that it's easily reversible and revisable in less than 30 minutes. This is a plot of my patients where they came from in the United States. And again, I welcome you to go and talk to my patients. In other words, make a list. Say you want to talk to 100 people that I've operated on, had the MGB, and you can talk to 100 people. Here's some examples of what I call fan mail, and I'm really excited to get these, you know, kind of nice reports. And so cut me out here a little bit. Fan mail. Hi, Dr. Rutledge. I'm now 75 years young and still loving my MGB done in 2002. So at this time, it was 18 years post-op. I talked to Trish this morning, who works with me. You saved my life. If you remember, I was 276 pounds and I've been doing well. I can still do the work of 5 men. I went to a size 2 over the last 20 years, but I've gained up to a size 8. Here's another one. I had an MGB in 2003. I weighed 328 pounds. I'm now 124. I'm 60 years old. I'll never regret having it done. Dr. Rutledge gave me my life back, and he is truly caring. Thanks, Doc. I was so lucky to have gotten the MGB 11 years ago in Vegas when you were there. I don't agree with you politically, but I still carry your torch. So on the other hand, there are bariatric tragedies, and you can look at them, and there are a variety of sleeve and Roux-en-Y Facebook pages that you can look at. One that I recommend is Weight Loss Surgery Ruined My Life, and this is some just unbelievably tragic stories of people having their surgery go very bad, and their sleeves, Roux-en-Ys, and lap bands. And I occasionally go here. I haven't seen any MGBs there that I know of. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to talk to thousands of people that have had the MGB, feel free to join us on Facebook. And now we have a WhatsApp group, which is pretty popular. So here's kind of my feelings about the advantages of the MGB when it's done as an MGB. First of all, uniquely, the MGB can be tailored to fit the patient and the surgeon's desires and needs and judgment. That is, we can adjust it. We have shown very high levels of patient satisfaction. There are controlled prospective trials showing the MGB is up to twice as effective for treating diabetes compared to the sleeve. The resolution of diabetes is between 85 and 90% at 10 years out in Dr. Kular's data in India. It decreases hunger, cholesterol, blood pressure, and C-reactive protein, and it enforces a healthy diet unless you're really fighting to go against it. And we'll give you some tips and pointers on that today. But there's this paradox, because there are other surgeons who have reported terrible outcomes, either poor weight loss or excessive weight loss, bile reflux, leaks, and even death. But again, these are my opinions, and you should speak with your own doctor, but these are my opinions here. This is where I've been fortunate to be invited to travel around the world and teach the MGB. Not everyone has listened to my advice. And so just because I visited a place doesn't mean that that person or that surgeon is a trained MGB surgeon. But there are a lot of people who have picked up the MGB technique and are doing it quite well. Just a reminder for those of you who might be new, the mini-gastric bypass is basically standard general surgery. There's nothing new. I didn't invent anything. All I did was basic general surgery. Its formal title is an anticolic Billroth 2 gastrojejunostomy. And when I did it, that seemed like a mouthful. And so I abbreviated it as a minimally invasive gastric bypass. And the name has stuck despite a lot of surgeons attempting to get rid of it. The advantages, the way I think about it, simple, it has very rapid recovery. It's elegant in its effectiveness. It's been shown to be one of the most powerful operations. It's durable now for greater than 20 years. It has tremendous potential power, yet it can also be tailored to individual patients. And it's trivially easy to revise or reverse completely. A lot of the criticisms I got when I first started, they said I did it too fast. And the hospital stay was too short. They said I didn't take out the gallbladder. When we first started, you were supposed to put the loop behind the colon, and I was heavily criticized for that. They said it was the old Mason loop, and people would have crippling bile reflux, and still some surgeons do get that. They said the Billroth 2 would lead to cancer, and they said the pouch and the connection, the gastrojejunostomy, are too big and patients wouldn't lose weight. They were wrong. I was right. They also criticized me because I used email and I had a website. Hello, old people. Well, we know what the past is, and that's kind of behind us. But we have something new now. The MGB is being adopted, but the IFSO has said it's no longer experimental. And so what's up in the future is the fear that people will start doing it half-baked or with problems and make the MGB look bad or harm patients and themselves. So we want to talk a little bit about that. Now, the topics I'm going to focus on in this talk is the diet after surgery. Well, it's not my diet, but I disagree with what a lot of surgeons do, and so I'll talk a little bit about that briefly. Essentially, what I recommend to my patients is to eat a healthy whole food diet, minimally processed foods, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole unprocessed grains, so like steel-cut oats, beans, and spices. I recommend that my patients or people that I consult with routinely avoid the addition of dietary salt, sugar, and fats, and that they avoid almost all protein supplements, meat, dairy, and eggs. So that's my dietary recommendations. And I have a whole long talk about why each one of those things is recommended. And this is just a short little introduction today in a special request. I think Dr. Michael Greger, who has a relatively recent book out entitled How Not to Diet, he focuses on these components for your healthy diet, which I tend to agree with. The food should be relatively anti-inflammatory. And there's a lot of foods that increase inflammatory markers. And most commonly, to my mind, they are meat, dairy, and eggs, which I think are highly inflammatory. And the other foods that I mentioned here in the previous slide are relatively anti-inflammatory. I think generally you want to look for chemical-free. You don't want a bunch of pesticides or plastics in your food, mercury, things like that, arsenic. So some foods I would avoid that have a lot of chemicals in them. For a lot of reasons, but I won't go into all of them, I choose relatively high fiber foods, and I would choose foods with a lot of water content, and that's basically foods like fresh fruits and vegetables, which are very high water content, up to 90%. Generally, you want foods that don't cause a big bump in blood sugar. You want relatively low-fat foods, low sugar, low addictive foods, low calorie density. And all of those goals are met by fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains. And that's why we also recommend low intake of meat, dairy, and eggs, because they tend to be foods that violate all those previous principles. Refined grains, like, for example, a Pop-Tart, a donut, a birthday cake, those are bad, we think, and should be avoided. Salty foods, so potato chips, French fries, fast food are relatively high in salt, so we recommend avoiding them. Foods that bump insulin, so like meat, dairy, and eggs, which cause a rise in insulin, along with free sugars like a Coke. And particularly, the new research shows that the bacteria in the gut are very important. And so we want to eat foods that grow healthy bacteria and do not grow the pathologic or sickening bacteria. Basically, all of these things tend to be met by a high fruit, high vegetable, high beans or legumes, satiating, low in supplements and protein powders is kind of the summary of my diet recommendations. There's a lot of other additional research, which I did the other day, but this is a short form that we're doing for a special request. So I'll go ahead and stop there. And we'll stop the share and say, I hope that that was somewhat interesting. If you want more detail, call me anytime. I'm happy to review that with you. It's pretty simple, and I can provide you with more research support for that another time. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.